You know what? Let's just jump into it then, shall we? Lions have another rough loss at home. I hate to lose any game, but I especially hate to lose home games, and I especially hate to lose on Thanksgiving because it does just make the holiday all the more depressing. But they don't just lose to any old team. They lose to, of course, the Green Bay Packers. And I know that they gave up 31 points, but the Lions did a decent job stopping the run. They held Josh Jacobs to under 100 yards. Granted, 83 yards, not exactly nothing. But Jordan Love was having his way pretty much the whole game. 4 touchdowns, 18 for 30. I could go down the stats. I don't really have to. The Packers were getting the breaks. They were making the big plays. They got the stops, et cetera, et cetera. It was tough. Like, basically, things were going really well for Green Bay, and things were just not going well for Detroit. Offense looked out of sorts. St. Brown's hurt, and he's probably not going to play this Thursday night game. He might be back against the Rams. Hopefully, he'll be back by then. J-Mo drops, unfortunately, the biggest pass of the game, which would have been a 4th down conversion, potentially for a touchdown, which could have swung the game further in favor of the Lions. They had an opportunity starting the third quarter, down 3, to be able to at least tie the game up if they could march down the field and get a kick. Couldn't do it. And Green Bay, just stayed ahead. Green Bay for most of this game was up by double digits. Granted, 10, but double digits nonetheless. And to add injury to insult, this all happened in the span between when I broadcasted last. Frank Ragnow comes out of retirement, and you're thinking, oh, okay, the Lions are going to get a boost in their offensive line. Actually, no. His hamstring is ripped into pieces, so that's not going to happen. He's done. And Terrion Arnold, done for the season. Shoulder surgery, ends his year after, frankly, when he was healthy, he was playing fine. Beginning of the season, it didn't look great, but he was starting to get better. He went into concussion protocol, then he got this shoulder injury, and now he's done, which is really, really, really sucks. And ultimately here, I will say this. The problems with this team, I think, are very simple, but they're obviously going to be difficult to overcome. Both the offensive line and the defensive line are just not good enough, And that's not to say that they don't have good players on either side of the offensive line. Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell. I know that Graham Glasgow is not exactly a fan favorite, but outside of the center position, he'd been pretty good for us. Christian Mahogany, when he is healthy, was pretty good for us. On the defensive line, obviously Aiden Hutchinson goes without saying. He's a very good player, despite the fact that the sack totals this year have been, frankly, pretty disappointing. But Aleem McNeil is a very good player. Unfortunately, you're out Levi Onwuzurike, who has really struggled to stay healthy his entire time as a Lion. And DJ Reader is an older, but a mostly consistent player up the middle. You got guys, but they're just not put in the right situation, in my experience. That's not to say that you shouldn't get better, because that is what I'm ultimately going to say, is that you need to go out, Brad Holmes, regardless of how the season ends, whether the Lions make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, win the Super Bowl, whatever. I guess if they win the Super Bowl, they can do whatever they want. Regardless of how the season ends, the trenches are priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, a million. They should be the first thing that I should hear in the offseason is, even before potentially free agency opens, is that the Lions are interested in trading for a defensive lineman or interested in trading for an offensive lineman. Straight up. And I know that Brad Holmes this offseason was controversial, and I was willing to defend it, but obviously I was defending it to the point that it would have success. And as far as the moves that were made or weren't made, we didn't go out and upgrade the defensive line to an extreme extent. We did get Roy Lopez, who has been decent, but he's a depth piece, not exactly a world breaker. We didn't really acknowledge the loss of Kevin Zeitler and Frank Ragnow in the offensive line, and that, I think, has significantly hurt this offense, regardless of the scheme, whether it was John Morton or Dan Campbell calling plays. And look, I'm not saying that they have to go out and trade 3 first-round picks for Max Crosby. They don't have to do that necessarily. Some of it, I'm sure, will come from internal development. We drafted Tyleik Williams for a reason. right? Presumably, he's going to be your DJ Reader replacement. And if he can develop to be a real good nose tackle, you're going to have a 1-2 punch of him and McNeil up the middle. That's going to be tough to beat. On the offensive line perspective, look, there's a reason, once again, that we drafted Tate Ratledge. There's a reason we drafted Christian Mahogany. There are guys that internally can get better. It's just not necessarily going to be this year. But that is not an excuse to say we're good. And I know that phrasing and that quote from Dan Campbell has been used put in a negative light. But look, you can't just say, especially if this season really unwinds and they miss the playoffs or they get blown out in the first round or whatever ends up happening. You can't just say we're good as far as the trenches go. You just can't. Like that would be malpractice. With all of that being said, this Thursday night, you got an opportunity to swing yourself right back into this. You had a rough month of November. You're allowed to have a rough night in the office. You've had several of those to this point. But the season doesn't end in November. It ends in January. So if you can swing yourself back to positive winning ways, obviously winning solves all problems. And the Cowboys, as hot as they are a team that you can beat. But this isn't, you're not going up against the 85 Bears. You're not going up against this unbeatable, the 2008 New England Patriots. You're going up against a Cowboys team that is playing with house money a little bit, that bought at the trade deadline. They got Quinnen Williams, but they're still, I think, a questionable unit. Even beating the Chiefs on Thanksgiving, I don't think they look like total world beaters. And they're going in with a coach in his first year. So you have a lot of things that are going your way. It's at home. So once again, that should be an advantage for you. And I don't know what the spread is. I'm assuming the Lions are favored. But this game, to me, is a must-win. If you lose this game, you will basically have to run the table just to make the playoffs. And to be perfectly honest with you guys, I don't like their odds of running the table with 2 division games and a game on the road against the Los Angeles Rams. I just don't like that. That is not an easy run the table schedule, especially with one of those division games being on short notice as it's a Thursday game on Christmas. Merry Christmas. So, but here's the thing. Regardless, and this is my final thoughts here, regardless of injuries, regardless of losing your coordinators, regardless of any of that, if you go from back-to-back division titles to, 15-2, best franchise record ever in a single season, highest scoring offense, not a great defense, but it was riddled by injuries, but you were finding ways to win games, undefeated on the road, all that shebang. You simply put cannot go from that quality of team to missing the playoffs. You just can't. And I think Brad Holmes, everybody from ownership, from Sheila Ford to Brad Holmes to Campbell to the players on the field, if that is the result of this season, it is an utter and abject failure. Completely. No excuses. And they will have to acknowledge that and sit with that for months. Half a year to be exact. About 6 months to be exact. Until they can bring this thing back, get the ship back in the right direction. And look, the Eagles went through this a couple of years ago. They lost their coordinators. They seemed like they were getting on a hot start. They started to fall apart. They made the playoffs. They get blown out in the wild card round. Guess what happened next year? They won the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that's you, but I am saying it could be you. Is that fair? I think that's fair. So I'm really just hoping that we do win on Thursday. I'm not convinced right now that this is a Super Bowl team because I just don't think you have the power in the trenches to be able to compete with teams like the Eagles or even the Rams, to be perfectly honest with you. But we'll get to that in a little bit because there's a lot of questions I have about the NFL and just how confusing it is this year. But you win on Thursday, you're right back in. And I said this was a 3-game stretch, your 3-game homestand. If you can get 2 out of those 3, you're feeling pretty good. If you can get 3 out of those 3, then that's great. Obviously, you're not going to get 3 out of those 3. But if you could get this win against Dallas, you'll have a long break going into that LA Ram game. And that could be good for getting St. Brown healthy. That could be good for Hopefully Graham Glasgow was back, because if you're gonna put in Tristan Colon again, that could be dangerous. Jared Goff might be dead by then. So very uplifting stuff, I know. So this is what happens when you lose on Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope everybody had a great holiday. Hey, YouTube, if you like clips like that, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. We've got live shows every Tuesday night. Hope to see you there.